I can't wait to see how this guy grows. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we are going to keep it pretty chill and pretty simple. We are going to do a 1-year growth update on my very first batch of uncommon or rare houseplants. Now back then they were a little bit more uncommon or rare. Today they have become a little bit more mainstream. It really does depend on the plant or where you're located, but I remember getting these last year. I couldn't wait to show it to you guys. I picked them up from the nursery, I filmed and I published that day. And that was this houseplant haul video we did. So today we're gonna do a side-by-side comparison of what they look like back then to what they look like now, and also share with you guys my experience with them so far. The good, the bad, and maybe the ugly. I'll let you guys be the judge for it. For those of you guys who's new to my channel, my name is Christian, also known as the Crazy Plant Guy, because I love plants and I'm crazy about them. If you're crazy about plants, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And for those of you guys who enjoyed this type of content, growth updates, make sure you give it a thumbs up so that way I know what kind of content you'd like to see. And by the way, for those of you guys who's followed me for a while, do you like the beard? Who knew a Filipino can grow a beard like this? I'm just kidding. But without further ado, let's get started. So the first plant I showed you guys was this Hoya Compacta albo marginita. And you guys can see right here, it is a beautiful Hoya. It is a variegated tricolor with a creamy white, pink, and green color to it. Beautiful. Now, the one thing with this plant and what I was expecting was not much growth. So this is what that plant looks like today. Ta-da! There you guys see it. So if I do a side-by-side comparison, you may see a bit of growth. You know, unfortunately, this particular Hoya does not grow really fast. So I wasn't expecting for a lot of growth, but nonetheless, there is a bit of growth that took place this past year. And I can't wait for it to grow a bit more this year. You know, I would love to see this plant in its full grown phase because it is a beautiful plant. I love the tricolor, but I would say it's probably not in my top 10 favorite Hoyas right now because I got about 23 and I would say this is probably like number 15, but still beautiful. And I'm happy to have this one in my collection. Now the next plant we're gonna look at is the Angelwing Maculata. So it's a begonia, and you guys can see that image right here when I first got it. Beautiful, beautiful begonia. You know, I love the silver polka dots on that like dark green leaves, and then the underleaf of that is like this burgundy or maroon color. Today, this is what that plant looks like. Ta-da! So you guys can see here, it is in 2 parts, and that's because I did cut this and propagate it and planted the top back in potting medium that you guys see right now. And this is the original mother plant. Now, the one thing I learned with begonias or cane-like type of plants like syngoniums is, you know, once you cut, and this actually goes for most plants, is the growth will take place at the highest point of where you cut. So that's exactly what happened here. And what I probably should have done is cut this guy a little bit lower and then made node cuttings with the middle to try and bring it closer to the bottom, because I'm kind of back to where I was when I originally cut the top. Is it's bare at the bottom and the growth is only happening here. So I'm probably going to cut this guy again, you know, maybe next week and do the same thing, root it in water and then, you know, plant it in a potting medium. And then that way this can grow a little bit closer to the base. And because I really do like the begonia when it's nice and full, but you know, we'll see how this goes. During the spring and summer, this plant is really easy to care for. They thrive. This even actually bloomed these beautiful pink flowers. But once winter came, they struggled quite a bit and I had to actually throw them in the greenhouse to kind of keep the leaves intact because they just kept dropping. You know, obviously it wasn't the ideal environment for them. You know, they do prefer a bit more of that humidity, and once winter came, you know, my relative humidity in the summer is usually around like 35, sometimes 40%. It dropped down to like about 15 or 20 and they just didn't like that. So I put them in the greenhouse during the winter, and now that it's spring, I brought them back out, and now we're gonna try and see if we can get this guy to take off and bloom again. But the next plant we're going to take a look at is a Hoya. It is the Hoya matildisplash, and you guys can see right here, a beautiful Hoya. Love the circular leaves with a bit of splash. Today, this is what that Hoya looks like. Ta-da! So if you guys can see side by side, there is a bit more growth on this one. It's a little bit more full, I noticed. And there's a few more vines just kind of shooting out and a lot more peduncles. Now, the cool thing about this Hoya is I actually found it really easy to care for. It is still potted in sphagnum moss. And that's one thing that's awesome about Hoyas. They really don't need like fancy potting medium. You can leave them in sphagnum moss or a very airy potting medium like cacti soil and perlite, and they'll do fine. And this actually bloomed twice for me. It produced these beautiful white flowers with like pink centers on it, and it smelled really, really nice. So really, really awesome. And there's a lot more peduncles on this one. And I'm hoping it'll produce more blooms this summer, but you guys can see right now, it's still healthy, it's loving it, and it's doing really well for me. Now, the next plant we're gonna take a look at is another Hoya. And this is actually one of my favorite Hoyas. It's the Hoya Da Nang Vietnam. And you guys can see why it's beautiful. These long, veiny leaves. And I love the cluster of leaves in this center part. It almost kind of looks like a star. Today, this is what that plant looks like. Ta-da! So you guys can see how much it's grown. It now has a second cluster of like leaves that's starting off here, and this is its newest leaf. And it has this nice long vine that also has like leaves on the side. Beautiful, beautiful Hoya. And I am so happy about this because this is honestly probably my top 3 favorite Hoyas. This one, the Parasitica Splash, and I'm really liking the Arena right now, but really, really beautiful. And it's doing really, really well under my care. I have most of my Hoyas upstairs in my bedroom on my headboard, so it's about, I would say, 5 feet away from my south-facing window. And you know, they're fine. That's the one thing that's cool about Hoyas is I actually find them really easy to care for. I think they're great for beginners because they don't really need like crazy humidity. And you know, they don't need a lot of watering. They're very low maintenance for me. And like I mentioned, the potting medium doesn't need to be so fancy, right? So, but nonetheless, beautiful, beautiful plant. And I'm so happy how well it did in the first year. Now, the next plant we're gonna look at is another Hoya. It is the Hoya Sunrise. And you guys can see how cool this plant is. I love the fact that it was on a trellis, and you guys can see that it was a bit sun stressed, so it produced these beautiful maroon colors on its leaves. Almost looks like a sun rays to me. So that's pretty much what I was going for. Today, this is what that plant looks like. Ta-da! There you guys see it. Look how much it's grown this past year. A lot more leaves, a lot more vines. And I actually even took a couple of cuttings from this guy to propagate. And the only thing I'm noticing is obviously it's not as sun stressed. I mean, we did just get out of winter, so most of the Hoyas aren't going to be sun stressed. So it did lose a bit of those colors that you saw in the earlier footage, but still a very beautiful plant. And I can't wait for this to grow some more this year. It is surprisingly a fast grower, similar to my Hoya Da Nang Vietnam. So I can't wait for it to obviously take off, become a little bit more full. I might actually want to add a longer or bigger trellis to try and create this like huge, kind of like a sun, shape of a sun, and then get the leaves to become a little bit more sun stressed, because that's pretty much what I was going for when I first got this plant. But yes, beautiful, beautiful Hoya. Now the next few plants we're going to dive into are a few philodendrons and a couple anthuriums. And these were the plants I was the most excited about because, like I said, I didn't own them before, and I was really scared caring for them, but I also couldn't wait to, you know, get those experience under my belt and really gain that experience. So the first plant we're gonna look at is this Philodendron 69686. You guys can see the footage. Beautiful plant. I love the tri-leaf shape of this plant, and it was full and it was prolific grower, and over the summer it was doing really, really well. Today, this is what that plant looks like. Ta-da! So, first of all, I do just want to say he's still alive, so that's the important part. Unfortunately, it dropped so much leaves this past winter, and I overwatered the plant. And that's one thing I've learned with the philodendrons I'm going to share with you guys is they do not like to be overwatered. And even prior to me owning some of these more uncommon philodendrons, I had like a heartleaf philodendron and a philodendron Brazil, and they did not do well under my care. You'd think they'd be a little bit easier for me, but I've learned that they were a little bit more difficult, so I really had to be careful with my watering and really back off of it. And I had to make sure that the potting medium was super chunky and super airy, because my habit of watering is I like to water thoroughly and allow that water to drain through. But if your potting medium isn't chunky or airy, especially when it comes to these types of philodendron, is they will drop leaves and they will not like it. So unfortunately, this 69686 is one of the bads that's in my collection right now. So moving on. Next plant we're going to take a look at is this Anthurium Crystallinum, and you guys can see, beautiful plant. I was so excited to finally have Anthuriums in my collection because I love the velvety leaves and that striking veining that's like crystal or white. It's just so beautiful. And today, this is what that plant looks like. Look how beautiful this leaf is, and this other one right now. So this is the 2 newest leaf. Now, those older leaves in the older footage have obviously dropped as this guy kind of grew. And you know, when I first got these plants, I think they were in a potting soil medium type. And I did eventually repot them into a very chunky and airy potting medium where I use cacti soil, bark, cocoa husk, perlite, and pumice. And this, unfortunately, the Crystallinum did not really like that potting medium. I overwatered it slightly, and I noticed that the roots were rotting, so I removed it out of that potting medium and I planted it in sphagnum moss, and since then, it's doing a lot better. Now, the one thing I noticed with the Anthurium Crystallinum is it is slightly a bit of a slower grower than the Clarinervium, which I'm going to show you guys after, but nonetheless, a beautiful plant. and I was so happy to finally have them in my collection. And the one thing I learned as well with Anthuriums, because after I got these two, I was like hooked. I want to get so much more Anthuriums. I think I have maybe about 11 now in my collection. But Anthuriums are actually a lot easier than what people make them out to be. I used to be so scared of them because they aren't cheap plants, so I think a lot of us are scared to care for them and kill it. But they really taught me a lot about proper potting medium and how to water your Anthurium and what they like and what they don't like. And you know, the next plant we're gonna take a look at is this Clarinerium that you guys see. So it was in a 4-inch pot, a little bit bigger than the Crystallinum, 4 leaves, but today this is what that plant looks like. Look how beautiful he is right now, and it's so full. I potted it up now in a 6-inch container, or I think this might be a 7-inch container. But there's a lot of leaves and even produced quite a bit of inflows or, you know, flower or blooms this past year. And it is such a beautiful Clarinerium. And I think, I already mentioned that I think Anthuriums are quite easy for me, but I would say out of all the Anthuriums, the Clarinerium is probably the least fussy ones because I actually had this outside the greenhouse over the summer. And it did fine. Again, my relative humidity in my room or in my place is about 30%, 35% during the summertime. And during the winter, I did move this into a greenhouse just to make sure it wasn't gonna decline on me during the winter months. This particular Clarinerium is still in that potting medium that I described, which is, you know, organic potting soil, orchid bark, cocoa husk, perlite pumice, and it's doing fine. The roots on this thing is crazy. And it's loving this potting medium. And like I said, I think it's one of the most beautiful Anthuriums out there, and it's also probably the easiest Anthurium. So if you ever do come across one of these and you are scared to kind of take on Anthuriums, I would say start off with the Clarinerium. But like I said, I think all Anthuriums are a little bit easier, you know, as long as you can kind of give them the proper humidity level and making sure that their potting soil or potting medium is quite airy and quite chunky. And don't allow that soil to dry out completely, or allow that plant to be sitting in dry soil for long periods of time, because what will typically happen is they will suck out the moisture from the leaves and the leaves will start to, like, you know, dry out pretty fast. So that's the one thing definitely I learned with Anthuriums. I actually do find them a lot easier than Philodendrons. I've never killed an Anthurium. I've killed a few Philodendrons, even the common ones, and you guys already saw with that 69686, that was pretty much in ICU right now. So the last two plants we're going to take a look at are a couple of Philodendrons. The first one being the Philodendron Gigas, and you guys can see here it was in this like 2 or 3-inch container, had about 4 leaves, and it was in this very chunky potting medium that consists of like cocoa chunks, key chunks, pebble clay, and some pumice. And today, this is what that plant looks like. Ta-da! So you guys are probably wondering, it does not look much different to when I first got it, and you're absolutely right. It still has 4 leaves. In fact, the newest leaf actually is really small. It dropped quite a bit of leaves, and I was actually expecting a bit more growth on this particular plant. But what I've learned now, because I do have another Philodendron Gigas that's like taking off like crazy, is it probably doesn't like this potting medium. It's probably too airy and too chunky where it's drying out quite a bit. And I do find I'm often watering this a lot more than my other Gigas, which is potted in sphagnum moss, similar to like the Anthurium. So I'm thinking I'm gonna switch this up. Now, the only thing I really love about this Philodendron Gigas is it did not give me as much problems or issues as this, you know, Philodendron Melanochrysum that you guys see here. And if you remember watching this video, I fell in love with this. I had a moment with it. I teared up on it because it was such a beautiful plant. And I remember seeing this at the New York Botanical Garden in like a large form, and the leaves were so massive, it was so velvety, and that is why I really wanted this plant. So I was really excited to finally get one. But what happened is I overwatered this plant quite a bit because the potting medium it was in wasn't like the one in this Hoya Gigas. It was more of a heavy potting soil. And because of the way I water, I overwatered it and the leaves started to drop and became so leggy, but it was producing growth. There were still leaves, you know, at the top there. But today, this is what that plant looks like. Ta-da! So you guys can see it is now just a tiny baby guy here, and that's because I ended up cutting this one a few times to try and propagate, and that's one thing I learned so much about this past year is propagating node cuttings. So that is exactly what happened with this Philodendron Melanochrysum. I first attempted air layering, which is a method where you wrap moss around the aerial root to try and grow it. And once the roots has grown, then you can cut it off and then plant that in a potting medium. But it just kept dropping leaves, so I ended up just chopping every node and then putting in a prop box. And what ended up happening is we produced so many of these little guys surprised right now that I managed to actually put them up for sale on my little shop. So I was really happy that it taught me how to do propagation in a prop box and how to properly care for philodendrons. Similar to the 69686 or the Hoya Gigas, they do not like to be overwatered, so I do have to be very careful. But what I also learned is they actually do better for me in sphagnum moss. I have a Philodendron brandy in sphagnum moss and another melanochrysum in sphagnum moss, and they are doing a lot better. So you can grow aeroids in sphagnum moss all their lives. I know a lot of people have done that. You just got to be mindful of the nutrients you got to provide them and when to repot them, right? So there you guys have it. Those are all the houseplants that I picked up last year and what they look like today. It's so cool to do side-by-side comparison because it really does kind of measure how well they've done or how poorly they've done. And again, when it came to these plants, I really learned a lot. So I'm very grateful for having them under my collection and really just gaining that experience. So comment below and let me know how your plants that you picked up a year ago is doing today compared to when you first got them. Are they doing really well? Are they growing or are they dropping leaves? And pretty much near death experience, comment below and share your experience. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Until next time, have a good weekend and we'll see you guys soon. Peace.